Hi, everyone. This is Nick Katko from BMA, and welcome to today's Lean Accounting webinar, Calculating Lean Performance Measurements. The first thing I'd like to do is a quick technical check. Please let me know if you can see me. Please let me know if you can hear me. Please let me know if you can see my presentation. And if you can put that in the question panel, that would be very helpful. All right, I got a couple of responses. That's good. Thank you very much. All right, so let me get the presentation going. From the administrative side, if you want a copy of the presentation, it should be in your handout section of your control panel. If you forget to download it, or if you're watching a recording of this webinar and would like a copy of the presentation, please feel free to send me an email and I'll send one to you. For those of you who are new to my webinars, I offer continuing education credit for certified public accountants. And if you attend the live webinar, you answer the 3 polling questions and you stay logged in for at least 50 minutes, you get 1 hour of credit. If you would like to receive a certificate, please send me an email and I'll get one out to you. Likewise, if you're not a certified public accountant and you would like to have a certificate of attendance, I'll also be glad to send you one. So today's webinar is focused on calculating lean performance measurements. And that's what we're going to spend the bulk of our time on, really looking at, the math behind it. How do you calculate these measurements, and to give you some alternatives. We're also going to explore the lean reasons why these measurements need to be part of your lean performance measurement system. That's the bulk of the webinar. I'm going to do a brief overview of what is a lean performance measurement system. Then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about the linkage chart process, which is what I recommend you use to develop a lean performance measurement system. Then we'll do a quick wrap up, take some questions. I will also, when we're doing the polling questions, I'll take polling survey, sorry. When we're doing the polling, that takes about a minute or so. I will look at the questions while you're completing the polling question and maybe even answer questions as we go. All right, so let's review, what is a lean performance measurement system? I think it really starts, let me put all these up. It really starts with understanding the difference between conventional performance measurements and a lean performance measurement system. And everything you see here on the screen is a difference, okay? Typically, conventional performance measurement systems, they're primarily used for reporting. You're reporting numbers. Reporting information. And okay, and typically a lot of performance measurements are outcome based, they're financially based. And another characteristic, which is the last part of this slide, is that there's usually too many measurements, okay? Now, a lean performance measurement system is more focused on real-time reporting. okay? It's an operational focus, not a financial focus. It's meant to be used by managers who are managing value streams and processes. And it's about having fewer measures. And you'll see as we go through the webinar, I talk about 5 to 7 measures, okay? One of the important things to remember here, what do you want the people to focus on in terms of performance measurements? If you give a department or a value stream like 16 or 20 different types of things to measure and report on, that's, first of all, they probably conflict. Secondly, it's too many measures to really dive in and understand what's driving the measures. So the idea is focus down 5 to 7 measures that are lean focused and support lean thinking, lean operations, lean practices, and work with those. So a lean performance measurement system is much more than the measurements. It's how the measures are used, okay? And they're displayed visually. They're used in daily huddles, weekly meetings, even monthly meetings. And the real purpose of these measurements is the plan, do, check, act process, lean problem solving. You want the measures to reveal problems. You want the measures to let you know if the problems are being solved, meaning the measure moves in the right direction. And that's what's really totally different about a lean performance measurement system compared to conventional metrics. And it really is a cultural shift. You want to reveal problems and issues, talk about problems and issues, and actually do something about solving them. When I help companies put performance measurement systems in place, I give them this advice. What I say is to the teams that are sort of reporting the measures on their visual boards and using them in daily and weekly meetings. If everything is working well and you're hitting the measurements, the targets, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Now, you could talk about the good things that are happening and how can we sustain them. But in terms of you talking to managers, you don't want the manager to come see the board and see that, the measures are not hitting their target, and that you as a team, you haven't told the manager about the problems and issues you're facing, whether you're solving them or whether you need help solving them. And that's a lot different than sort of conventional practices. Lean performance measurements is about problem solving, okay? And it's also a learning process, okay? And because lean is really a learning process. You want teams to learn how to execute against certain performance standards. For example, schedule attainment, okay? In manufacturing, that would be, how many units does a cell need to produce today based on the demand plan, all right? Did they produce those units or not? That's the performance standard. A performance standard can also, and so what you're doing is, trying to teach people how to identify the root causes. What I tell teams that in terms of performance measurements, it's okay if the measurement doesn't hit the standard or the target as long as you know why, the root cause. That's success in a lean performance measurement system. But it's not okay if you're not hitting the standards and you don't know why, because you're not diving in to get to the root causes. And you also want to use the performance measurements. How can we improve the standard of performance? For example, you can have you could be measuring defects on a daily basis, and maybe right now today, a 5% defect rate is acceptable. Eventually, you want to figure out how can we get it down to 3%, for example. That's the improving the standard of performance. How often should you measure? Okay. And this is sort of guidelines, okay? Factors that influence the measurements. How fast does a process need to recognize and respond to changing conditions? Sometimes it's hourly, sometimes it's daily, could be weekly. And in some cases, you'll see it could be monthly, especially when it comes to sort of strategic type initiatives. You also have to consider how long does it take for a change to be reflected in the process performance? How do you sort of adjust the process to get back on track? And then two other factors which influence how often to measure are the actual process time, okay, and the rate of demand. So for example, a long process time, you're building a big turbine. Okay, you're not going to finish that turbine in one day. So that helps determine the frequency compared to if you're in a very high volume manufacturing environment where a process is producing hundreds or thousands of products a day. So again, these are just factors for discussion to try to figure out what's the best frequency of measurements for any value stream or any process. So in general, there are 3 measurement cycles. Daily, and you could look at this sort of either by how often you measure, daily, weekly, or monthly. You can also look at it based on the level in the organization. It could be the cell level or a process level, it could be the value stream level, could be the company or business unit level. Okay, so it's I have a tendency to use daily measures or cell measures interchangeably, value stream and weekly measures interchangeably. What's important here to understand is the purpose of the measure. Any kind of daily measure, meeting performance standards. Weekly or value stream measures, you're measuring improvement over time. And the monthly type measures, you're measuring the strategic initiatives over time. The other factor or the other piece is what types of improvements, problem-solving activities does each type of measure drive. Your daily measures, your seller process measures drive sort of the just do it improvements. Problems that the cell can solve by itself in the normal course of work. The weekly value stream measures measuring improvement, they're going to be driving Kaizen events. They're going to be driving smaller type of value stream improvement events. And your strategic measures really are measuring the overall strategy deployment process. You have the initiatives, and then, are these initiatives being cascaded down in the organization? And what progress is being made. And there's variations on this depending on the company, okay? And depending on the process, which we talked about earlier. The other piece of a lean performance measurement system is sort of defining terms, okay? And because I've seen over the years that people can get these terms confused. There's a goal. That is the ultimate objective. So for example, perfect quality. The goal doesn't change, and these are sort of lean focused goals. Perfect quality, short lead times, things like that. So it's sort of conceptual at one level. The measure is really measuring the distance from the goal. What is the defect rate? A target is how much the measure needs to move over a certain period of time. For example, you want the defect rate to improve 20% this coming year. And it's really important we're talking about the measures, but it's important to have the goals out there. And I'm going to show you one way that the goals can be defined when we talk about the linkage chart. It's also important to have targets. You could have a daily target of, for example, schedule attainment. You could have a target to make improvement. But it's important to have all three aspects in your performance measurement system. So right now, and that's what the targets do. Okay, what problems must be solved to hit the target? What problems must be solved to make progress towards the goal? And how do lean practitioners talk about this? That's what continuous improvement is. All right, so let's do the first attendance check. And I'm gonna launch it. And I'll take a quick look at questions to see if there are any. All right, nobody has any questions yet. All right, I'll give you about 10 more seconds. Excuse me. All righty, I'm going to close the poll. I'm not going to share the results. And we'll go back. So now let's get into the main part of today's webinar is, actually doing the calculation of these measurements. So first, let's start with the basic categories of lean performance measurements and why you measure. It's really the lean reason why to measure. Now, again, if you have familiarity with lean performance measurements, you may see some variations on this. Right now, I'm listing 8 different categories. I will say that material flow and lead time are very similar. The reason I broke material flow out is because for manufacturing and inventory. If you don't have inventory, then you're not measuring material flow. So delivery, you want to meet customer delivery expectations. That's sort of, you think about lean goals. Quality, you want to improve quality, but you want quality at the source. You want to be able to check, you want to be able to identify defects as soon as possible and correct them. There's also the preventing of defects. Lead time, you want to continually reduce lead times throughout the business. Material flow, you want to minimize your inventory. You want to increase the velocity, the movement of inventory through your manufacturing company. Productivity is increasing output with the same resources. We want to reduce costs over time. We want to prevent safety incidents from occurring, and respect for people. Okay, so let's dive into these in detail. Let's start with delivery. So the lean thinking behind measuring delivery, it's measuring meeting customer expectations. Okay, this is the demand. This is the work that the process must perform to achieve the output that a customer wants, whether it's making a product or delivering a service. And even for example, in accounting, it's delivering information on time. So you want to base the measure on what the customer wants, not a promise date. I hear this all the time in manufacturing. Because most manufacturing companies measure on-time delivery. So I ask them, how do you measure it? What's your percentages? They can pretty much tell me. And then I say, are you measuring that on promise date or request date? Many times they say, well, we measure both. You want to measure against request date because that is meeting the customer expectation, and you want to understand the problems and issues that are preventing you from meeting that request date. A promise date is a negotiated date where you talk to the customer and you say, this is when we can deliver it. Is that good enough for you? And you sort of compromise because you can't meet what the customer really would like. So we measure this daily, weekly, and monthly. The basic equation, the numerator is the number of orders shipped on time. The denominator, total orders. Now, customizing the measure. If your business company has long cycle times, for example, you don't get orders out in one day, okay? They take maybe weeks or months because of your product. Or in software, you don't release software every day or every week. So if it comes to long cycle times, you want to use, what are the value-added tasks that need to be completed daily, weekly, or monthly to eventually, or to drive getting the order out and meeting customer expectations. So let me give you some examples. So, in manufacturing and service, if you have short cycle times, you can use actual orders for the week for, on-time delivery. How many orders were supposed to go out, or how many orders went out during the week, how many were on time. You can use it monthly, but use an average there. What's the sort of the 3-month or 12-month moving average for on-time delivery? As I mentioned, software is an example of long cycle times. You might have this also. There's manufacturing operations that have long cycle times. So what are the value-added tasks that were completed, the number of tasks completed over the total tasks that were supposed to be completed? In healthcare, you can use the percentage of patient services that were delivered on time. Again, there's a plan of when the services are supposed to be delivered and what time were they actually delivered. In accounting, you can look at, number of reports delivered on time. You can look at the percentage of month-end tasks completed on time. Now, the daily measurement that links to delivery is schedule attainment. So what are we supposed to get done today, and what did we actually get done today? And every day is a new day, okay? So And a lot of times in systems, I know, manufacturing ERP systems, it can calculate on-time delivery. So you can extract this information out of systems, okay? Measuring quality. Now, every manufacturing company I've worked in, they measure quality. And, it's very common, even if you're not a lean company. And, the other place where quality is measured also is in healthcare, okay? So the lean thinking behind measuring quality is it's the ability to detect and eliminate defects before you actually deliver, okay? You don't want the customer telling you there's a quality problem. You want to understand, you want to know when a product goes out the door or when a service has been completed that the quality is good. So you want to base this measure on customer quality requirements. Now, if you're making products, the quality is very objective. You have to make it to meet certain performance requirements or safety requirements. When you're delivering a service, there might be some subjectivity between customers, okay, about what the quality is. You measure quality at a minimum daily and weekly and possibly monthly. Basic measurement, you can measure the defect rate or the first time through rate. The defect rate is the number of defective items divided by the total number of items. The first time through rate is the number of good items divided by the number of total items. Now, in terms of customizing this measure for services and administrative processes, you have to define what a defect is, okay? Typically, it's, missing in like administrative processes, it would be missing or incorrect information. So let's look at, a few different types of measures. Daily or cell measurement, what was the defect rate today? Or what was the first time through rate today? Now, this is the best place to understand the root causes. Why? Because you know what the defects are. It's very easy to understand why it occurred. When you look at a weekly measure or a value stream measure, you're looking at the average defect rate for the entire value stream over time. You're trying to improve it. Monthly measurement, I'm always hesitant to recommend a monthly quality measurement. Now, you could use warranty or returns, okay? That's one thing. What you want to do is you want to avoid, for example, the cost of quality. I know that, at a monthly level, leaders want to understand quality, but they really can't do much if no matter what number you give them. They really can't do a whole lot in terms of helping identify root causes with the numbers you give them. You have to be closer to the action to understand the root causes. So actually, one of the things I sort of talk about, especially with senior leadership teams, is you don't really need a number. What you need to do is understand what improvement activities are going on to improve quality and how can you support those improvement activities. And remember, defining a defect, there can be some subjectivity involved in that, especially when it's service. But when it's, product quality or the quality of information, it's pretty objective. It's good. The product works or the product doesn't. The information that I receive is useful to me to do what I need to do, or it's not useful. Lead time. Lead time measures the ability of to deliver goods or services faster. Okay, this is your speed measure. Okay, lean practices are designed to shorten lead times by eliminating waste. Now, lead time is typically measured weekly or monthly. I like to say that lead time is a very good measure to understand the overall impact of your lean strategy and the deployment of lean practices and value streams. If lead times aren't being reduced, then I think you really have to go in and examine how are the lean practices being deployed and used. Basic equation is the average time from receipt of an order to the delivery of the order. You know, that's easy in manufacturing. We receive an order, and then when did we receive it? When did we ship it? There's also a formula called Little's Law, which allows you to calculate the lead time for anything. Okay, that's the basic equation you see here. If you want to learn more, please go online and Google Little's Law, and you'll find out a whole lot about it. And actually, there's even some I think templates you can download that are free that'll calculate it. You know, for administrative purposes, in terms of creating a lead time measure, what's an order? Okay, what do your customers want, and when do they ask you for it? Okay, there's some discussion that has to go on there. It's important to understand that the lead time can be measured in any process. You can measure, you know, besides filling orders, you know, you can measure the lead time for hiring a new person. You could measure the lead time for month-end close. You can measure the lead time for various types of marketing and sales activities. For example, you know, what's the quoting? If you prepare quotes, you know, your salespeople prepare quotes. What's the quoting turnaround time from the time you receive a request for a quote to the time you deliver the quote? How long does it take? Okay. Sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it doesn't. But again, you know, and I don't have this on a slide, total lead time is the sum of the value added time, the work that has to get done, plus all the non-value added time in there. So again, lead times shrink because the non-value added activities go away through continuous improvement. So here's some examples, which some have explained verbally. You know, order fulfillment, manufacturing, sometimes in service fulfillment, accounting, you know, month-end close time. Now in hours, not days. Okay. You know, yeah, you might close in 3 days, but the question is how many hours, how many person hours does it take to close in 3 days? That's how you figure out where the waste is and how to reduce it. Okay, because closing in 3 days, but having your accounting team work 12 hours a day for 3 days, that's not very lean. Average days to pay suppliers invoices, average length of patient stay. And again, the daily measurement, there's no lead time for daily measurement. It links to schedule attainment. And what I mean by that is that if you hit the schedule attainment measures, each cell is doing that, you know, it will drive lead time reduction. So, you know, one slide on material flow, okay, which is measuring inventory. most of you who, if you have familiarity with lean, one of the outcomes of lean practices and methods is reducing inventory, because inventory is considered waste, okay? And it's designed, the lean practices are designed to move the material as fast as possible through the business. Now, lean, measuring inventory can be done daily, weekly, or monthly. Now, it can also be used, I'm skipping down to customizing. It can be used in non-manufacturing companies, for example, in healthcare where you have supplies. Now, you may even count those supplies as inventory. I don't know. But if you even count them as supplies, you can apply measuring material flow. Okay. Basic equation, inventory turnover or days of inventory. Okay. And those are the calculations there. They're pretty standard calculations. I do recommend using days of inventory. I know a lot of finance and accounting people like to use inventory turnover, but days of inventory is easier for non-financial people to understand because you don't have to do the math in your head. Okay. If we have 40 days of inventory and we go down to 30, that's good. If we go to from 3 turns to 4 turns, that is good, but I just don't know sort of the scale of what I've done. Okay. On a daily measurement, you're not necessarily counting inventory, but if you have a pull system in place, you want the teams to understand what's the actual work in process inventory in a process or a cell compared to what the plan was. Because if there's more, or the planned level is to keep flow moving. If there's more or less, that's an indication that there's a flow issue. Productivity is measuring the increasing output with the same resources. And it measures the effectiveness of lean practices and improvement, measured weekly or monthly. Okay, so the basic equation is what's the value added output? So it can be as simple as how many units were shipped. Okay, the denominator is total employees or hours worked. So, if you think about this from a lean viewpoint, you eliminate waste, you create capacity, you can use that capacity to deliver more value. Okay, so again, you can sell and ship more, or you can deliver more services with the same number of people. Because you've eliminated the waste, the people have more time to spend on value-added work. Now, much like on-time delivery, you have to define what value-added output or demand is in processes with long cycle times, okay? Because you're not actually shipping a product or delivering a service. So here's some examples. On a weekly and monthly basis where you have short cycle times, the weekly measure could be sales or shipments over hours worked. You can also do sales per person on a monthly basis. Long cycle times, what you have to do is substitute the numerator, and as opposed to sales, the number of value-added tasks completed. Now, I forgot to mention something about sales. You can use the monetary value of sales, or you can use units. If you have product mix issues, you can come up with some weighted average of what the units are or what the sales value is. Healthcare, hours worked per patient day. Accounting, how much time are we spending correcting defects divided by the total hours worked? Okay, because if we improve quality, we'll spend less time on the defect correction and therefore have more time to create value. And again, schedule attainment links to productivity. If every cell in a value stream is hitting its schedule consistently, it will then drive improvements in productivity. All right, it is time for attendance check number 2. Okay, while you're doing that, Eric asked me, is it the number of defective items versus total defects? It's the number of defective items divided by total items produced. That's a defect rate. And then Amanda asked about what's the best way to ensure everyone is working toward the same goals. I will show you something, Amanda, when we talk about the linkage chart in a few minutes. Okay. All righty, I closed the poll. Let me get back to my screen. So we're going to talk about cost and a few other measures, then we'll go into the linkage chart. So measuring cost. Okay, lean will reduce costs over time. If you look at I have a webinar or 2 out there about this you can access via the website. Okay, how does lean reduce costs over time? It either reduces actual costs. I'm sorry, it does both. It reduces actual costs and it avoids future costs. That's the idea of eliminating waste and creating capacity. Okay, you create capacity, for example, and you don't have to hire people because you have the capacity because you eliminated waste. That's avoiding a future cost. So you want to look at this measuring costs weekly or monthly. And I would like to say here, seeing the cost reduction takes time, okay? It's really a function of, the maturity of your lean practices and the level, or I want to say the level of your continuous improvement activities, okay? That's going to really drive cost reduction. So you really have to think of this as a long-term measure. Best basic equations, you could use actual costs as a percentage of sales. That's effective for things like labor. You can also use actual cost per unit or per service provided. The tip, use actual costs. Avoid using any cost allocations, okay? So here's some examples. So contribution margin is a very good measure to use. Sales less the variable costs, okay? For fixed costs is a percentage of sales, such as labor. Labor is a fixed cost, not a variable cost. You can use average cost per unit, okay? It's like average actual cost per patient or per service. On a daily measure, really what you want to drive is what are the drivers of costs? For example, understanding why you're working overtime. Overtime, yes, you're going to spend the money, but why are we working overtime? Maybe it's changeover time, but try to think of within the cell that you're looking at, what could be driving the costs? Safety and morale. I say this a lot in any kind of training or coaching. People are a lean company's most important asset. People solve problems. People do the work. People do improvement events. Okay, that's why that's why lean companies look at them as an asset, even though the cost of people, salaries and wages and stuff, that's an expense. So what do we want to do for our most important asset? We want to create a safe working environment. Okay, that is essential for a sustainable lean culture. And morale is respect for people, which, some people will describe lean as continuous improvement and respect for people. So in all cases, you have to show respect for people. And lean, if you're already on a lean journey, you might have these measures in place. Okay, safety, again, safety is like quality in manufacturing. You measure it, whether you're lean or not, typically. You want to measure incidents and near misses per person on a daily, that's weekly or monthly. On a daily basis, safety cross. Did we have any incidents today? Yes or no? Okay. And the idea of the cross is you have the 30 days of the month there and you just mark them, red or green. You can have, safety issues in administrative processes. People sit at computers all day, whether it's repetitive motion, eye strain, psychological safety. Healthcare safety is very important from the patient viewpoint. Patient falls, okay? From a morale viewpoint, are your employees engaged? Continuous improvement time divided by total hours worked. Skill development, measure the progress in developing new skills. You can do training hours per person. You can do a daily morale check in a daily huddle. How do you feel today? This or this. How was today? And if you're like this, why? Okay. All right, final attendance check. Oh, Hank Barr had a good question. He said, "What does unused capacity cost?" If you think about people, you're paying your people, no matter what they do. If they perform a wasteful activity, you're still paying them. Um, you know, so whatever your old salary expenses, that's how much your unused capacity cost. There's also the opportunity cost of what could you be doing with it. All right, I'm going to close the poll. All right, and let's talk about the linkage chart. This is a way to develop a lean performance measurement system. This is the process that we use, or that I use when working with a company and they want a lean performance measurement system in place. Let me show you what it looks like, okay? And I always say this it's like an eye chart, okay? You start with what are the sort of the lean strategies? And you say, okay, how are we going to measure at a strategic or company level whether the effectiveness of our strategic initiatives? You create measures. These are the basic measures we've gone over. Then you link them, okay? Sometimes a measure will link to more than one strategy. Then from there, remember I talked about goals and measures and targets. So then you set goals at the value stream level. What goals should the value stream strive for in order to drive the strategic measurements? And then how are we going to measure at the value stream level the distance from the goal? Then you take it down to the cell level where you have critical success factors, okay? That's sort of like, what do we have to do? What do we try to do every day? Then you have sort of improvement goals. You link them, and then you create daily measures. And it's really a very interesting process. Measures are linked as opposed to some conventional systems where everybody tries to roll the measure up, okay? So that it's like this, they roll up, and that's not always effective. But that's the output, okay? And, the process is much like a Kaizen event, okay? And think about it this way, you're developing the linkage chart and the performance measurement system. So the plan step, you have a cross-functional team. You actually go through the linkage chart development process that I showed you on the previous slide. Okay, actually, and my recommendation is you use Post-it notes, okay, because you're going to be changing things around. Then you actually, in the plan, you try to calculate what's the equation for the measure, okay, what you think it should be. And really, in the plan event, you may go out and see, is it simple and easy to calculate? Then you deploy the measures. That's the do step, and it's a pilot deployment. You want to take these measures you've developed and use them in the business. Daily measures, use them in the huddles, put them on the board, use them for 30 days, okay? Weekly measures, I typically recommend 4 to 6 weeks. Monthly measures may take longer. And what you're trying to do is determine the effectiveness of the measures. That's the check step. Are they effective in identifying problems and root causes? Are they simple? And how easy are they to use? Now, this is the check process is where coaching needs to come in play, okay? If any team doesn't have experience with lean performance measurements, it's always best to have a coach who has experience with a lean performance measurement system, help coach them along, okay? They're learning. The pilot deployment is learning, okay? And then the adjust, at the end of the pilot phase, you end the pilot, okay, we're done. What you end up typically finding in the pilot phase is there might be a measure or two that doesn't really work very well. And so you might have to reformulate the measure so that it works. The trap you don't want to fall in is that the measures are just reported. For example, they're just put on a board. They're not really doing root cause analysis, okay? You have to stop that very, very quickly. That's why coaching is needed, okay? Because if people get used to just putting the numbers on the board, then they think they're doing their job, okay? The benefits of using the linkage chart, okay? Here's what it does. It helps rationalize the measures. What measures do we have today that qualify as lean performance measurements and which do not? You get gaps. Where are the gaps? What lean performance measurements don't we have that we need to create? You test the effectiveness, which I talked about on the previous slide, and you rationalize which measures do we need to use, which measures do we need to stop using. The linkage chart process is the way to get down to 5 to 7 measures in every part of the business. That's why it's effective. All right, wrapping up, remember, complete the survey that you'll get at the end of this webinar. If you want a continuing education certificate, send me an email. If you'd like just a certificate of attendance, let me know. Be glad to send it. All right, remember that, this lean performance measurement system, teams own their measure, whether it's a cell team, a value stream team, a senior leadership team. As much as possible, they self-monitor, they self-report. They're used for learning and problem solving. They need to be simple and easy to use. They need to be, the calculation needs to be understood. As much as possible, let the team calculate the measure. Now, in some cases, like on-time delivery, you can get that out of a system. Okay, that's fine, but they still need to know where it's coming from, okay? You know, like, for example, days of inventory, you know, accounting and finance typically would calculate that. That's fine, okay? But they need to, if they understand the measure, that's why, you know, these equations we talked about earlier, keep them simple, okay? So then they become sort of mental in terms of they understand them mentally, not just what the number is, okay? All right, so upcoming events. In terms of webinars, I'm going to take the summer off. I'll start webinars up in September. I want to work on some other things. If you want to learn more detail about lean performance measurements, you know, both in practicing lean accounting and the lean CFO, there's a lot more detail than was in this webinar. You have any questions about lean performance measurements, please feel free to contact me. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. And just sort of like a little preview, you know, one thing I'm going to be working on this summer is a lean accounting online certification course. Okay, this is going to be sort of self-paced. It's going to be web-based, where you register. You know, you register, and then you take the course. You have to take a simple quiz after each class, and then you get certified. So you know, I'm going to be working on that. If you're on the mailing list, you'll get information on it, and then, you know, as I get closer to actually deploying this, you know, I'll let you know more about it. So let me see if there's any more questions. I don't see any. So we can wrap up. So again, you know, thanks for attending. Hope this webinar was useful, and you'll get a copy of a link to the recording in about 3 or 4 hours. Okay, and have a good day. Hope to see you soon online. Bye-bye.